Something hit me the other day. I was standing in my kitchen at 6 in the morning, holding a mug I hadn't used in 3 years. It was hers. I didn't throw it away after the divorce. I just kept it, pushed to the back of the cabinet, behind the ones I actually use. And that morning I held it for a second, thought about putting it back where it always was. And then I walked to the trash and dropped it in. Nothing dramatic happened. No tears, just this quiet thing that shifted somewhere behind my sternum. That was the moment I understood what Jung spent decades trying to explain. Because here's what most people don't realize. Letting go of someone doesn't happen in the heart. It happens in the brain. And the moment it finally happens, the real moment, not the fake version you tell yourself at 2 in the morning, your brain starts doing something it hasn't done in months, sometimes years. Neuroscientists call it re-regulation. Jung had a different name. Older, more precise. I want to walk you through both. When you're attached to someone, romantically, emotionally, any way that matters, your brain treats them like a substance, not a metaphor, an actual neurochemical substance. Every time they texted you, every time they walked into a room, every time they laughed at something you said, your brain released dopamine, anticipatory dopamine, the kind that floods the reward circuit not because something good happened, but because something good might happen. The brain lights up for the possibility of them, not just the presence. And then there's oxytocin, the bonding chemical. It doesn't just make you feel close to someone. It literally signals to your nervous system. You are safe. You belong. You are not alone. Over months and years, that person becomes neurologically woven into your sense of security. They're not just someone you love. They become part of the architecture of how your brain tells itself everything is okay, which means when they're gone, not gone like they went on a trip, but gone, your brain doesn't process it as heartbreak. Not exactly. It processes it as withdrawal. Brain imaging studies show that the regions activated during rejection and loss overlap directly with the regions activated during physical pain. The anterior cingulate cortex, the part of your brain that flags pain signals, lights up during heartbreak, the same way it lights up when you break an arm. You weren't being dramatic. You weren't being weak. Your brain was going through withdrawal from its most consistent source of safety chemistry. And this is where it gets interesting, because Jung had already figured this out, without brain scans, without imaging technology, just by paying obsessive, relentless attention to people in pain. In The Psychology of the Transference, published in 1946, Jung wrote something that most people find confusing when they first encounter it. He said that in intimate relationships, we don't actually love the other person at first. We love a projection. Stay with me here. He called it the anima and animus, the unconscious image of opposite energy that lives inside every person. When you meet someone and feel that electric recognition, that feeling of, I know you somehow, I've been waiting for this. What you're often experiencing is your own unconscious, reflected back at you through their face, their voice, the specific way they hold themselves in a room. You're not seeing them. You're seeing yourself. I know that sounds harsh. But Jung didn't mean it as a criticism. He meant it as the beginning of self-knowledge. Because the things we love most intensely in another person, the tenderness that undoes us, the wildness that draws us in, the quiet confidence we can't explain, those are usually things we've exiled in ourselves, qualities we abandoned somewhere along the way. Softness we decided was weakness. Parts of us the world said didn't fit. You fall for someone because they carry something you gave up. And here's the thing about a projection. It fades. Not immediately, Usually somewhere between 18 months and 3 years into a relationship, the initial charge starts to settle. The image you overlaid on this person begins to lose its grip, and you're left looking at who they actually are, which can be beautiful if you've both grown alongside each other, or it can feel like waking up next to a stranger while your alarm clock goes off. Most falling out of love isn't falling out of love at all. It's the projection breaking. So what actually happens when you finally, genuinely let go? Your prefrontal cortex starts coming back online. When you're deep in attachment, especially painful unresolved attachment, the prefrontal cortex, the region of your brain responsible for reasoning, future planning, and your sense of self, gets chronically underactivated. The limbic system, the emotional engine, is running hot. You're not thinking clearly. You're responding, reactively, chemically, compulsively. You check their profile even though you said you wouldn't. You drive past their street. You replay the same conversations on a loop looking for the sentence that could have changed everything. That's not you being weak. That's the limbic system overriding the part of your brain that would otherwise say, "This isn't helping you." But the brain has neuroplasticity. The circuit that got trained can be retrained when someone genuinely releases an attachment, not suppresses it, not numbs it with new distractions or alcohol or someone else's attention, but actually metabolizes it. Something measurable shifts. The prefrontal cortex regains its voice. You start making different choices. You notice things you stopped noticing. Creativity that went quiet returns. Sleep changes. Your relationship to your own reflection changes. Something in your eyes is back that you didn't realize was gone. I watched this happen in hospice. Not with romantic loss, but with death. I sat with people who hadn't been able to speak their loved one's name for years without leaving the room. And then, one day, they'd tell a funny story about them. Just a small one. Something about a habit or a phrase they used. And they'd laugh. A real laugh. Something in their posture changed when that happened. Less compressed, like a weight had found somewhere to land that wasn't their body anymore. That isn't forgetting. That's integration. Jung had a word for what happens after a projection breaks and gets worked through. He called it individuation, the long, unglamorous process of becoming whole by retrieving what you projected outward. Because the tenderness you loved in them, that's yours. The quiet strength, the creative fire, the capacity for depth. Those are yours. That's why you recognized them. You weren't discovering something foreign. You were encountering your own unlived life, walking around in someone else's body. Letting go, in Jung's framework, isn't loss. It's retrieval. You get to keep what you loved. You just have to carry it yourself now. There's a passage in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, where Jung says the goal of individuation is detachment from emotional relationships. Taken out of context, that sounds cold, clinical. Like he's suggesting you stop feeling things. But read it in full, and what he's saying is something different. He's saying that love built entirely on projection is love that depends on the other person remaining your projection, remaining incomplete, remaining a screen, which means you're not really loving them. You're loving the story you've been telling about them. And anytime the real person steps outside that story, it feels like betrayal. He also wrote this, and I had to sit with it for a long time. Where love rules, there is no will to power. And where power predominates, their love is lacking. The attachment that won't release, the one that keeps you checking, keeps you hoping, keeps you rewriting the ending. That isn't love. That's the psyche refusing to do its own work. Clinging to the projection, because looking at what's underneath it is harder. And when the work finally happens, when you finally genuinely let go, the brain doesn't go quiet. It goes clean. There's a specific kind of clarity that arrives after real release. A silence that isn't empty but spacious, like after a long rain when the air shifts and something far away becomes visible again. You dropped the mug in the trash that morning, and the kitchen felt different. Not lonely. Just yours. You're not empty when you finally let go. You're available for the next real thing. For yourself. Maybe for the first time in years. Sit with that for a moment.